Welcome back to the ReTribalize podcast. Today I want to talk about Ken Wilber and his spiral dynamics. I took a lot of this from his book, The Theory of Everything. And today I just want to talk about how the development of human psychology or individual consciousness is mapped to the cultural development of how we've progressed from hunter-gatherer bands basically towards a planetary civilization. And this is very important framework for ReTribalize projects in general. I think Ken Wilber is kind of the philosopher for the tribes of the future. And he breaks down this individual consciousness and cultural development in a way that makes it easy to understand the political divides we face today, how people are stuck in different levels of consciousness and how societies come to reflect these levels of consciousness. And it brings us to this really crucial moment we're at right now, where essentially there's a war between centralized global power and decentralized power, which we're going to get to. So hopefully I can break this down so that we can use this in later podcasts with Brennan, talking about decentralization and the tribes of the future. So welcome back to the ReTribalize podcast. My name is Christian. Let's dive right into it. So essentially, he maps in spiral dynamics that individuals start at the basic or instinctive level of consciousness, which he maps as beige. And the instinctive level of consciousness is basic biological needs, fight or flight responses, individual survival instincts. You can think of a baby, like a child, right? And then the child develops into the magical animistic level of consciousness. And this is like tribal consciousness, ancestral spirits, magical thinking. It's kind of dreaming. It's like a dreaming level of consciousness. And then we advance into the impulsive or egocentric level of consciousness, which is very power-driven, immediate gratification, dominance, hierarchies, might is right. We can think of like a child on the playground who's just learning what his ego and identity is. And we can even map this again into the cultural level of city-states and empires. We can look at the Greek city-states. They were really driven by the heroic ideal. They were driven by the power god level of consciousness. And we're gonna go deeper into the cultural evolution. So then we go to the blue meme. And all of these memes that I'm speaking of here, you can think about them as sensibilities, like a way of relating to the world. And the next level of relating to the world is the conformist or mythic. This is kind of like the traditional consciousness, right? And it is a level of absolute truth, moral order, duty, sacrifice for the greater good. And the conformist, mythic, traditional level of consciousness, you can map onto feudal kingdoms. So medieval Christianity, divine right, moral hierarchies, absolutism. Basically, from the medieval times all the way up to the Enlightenment, we are, as a humanity in Western civilization, we are in the blue mythic meme, right? And this is why we saw like patriarchy, the Catholic Church, strict hierarchies. And a lot of the people on the trad right now, they enjoy this sensibility to some degree. They want to return to more of a traditional structure and order. And while I sympathize with the people who want to return to tradition, we don't actually need to go backwards. We need to go to the higher level of thinking and the higher level of feeling, which is integral, which we're going to talk about. It's basically all of these. So after the blue sensibility, we come to the orange, and this is modern capitalism, right? So during the Enlightenment, essentially, and the scientific revolution, everything changed. We lost trust in this absolute hierarchy of God and then priests, and the medieval feudal world order. And we came into a consciousness of scientific enlightenment, progress, individual achievement, and competition. And this orange meme, you could think about someone like Donald Trump. You could think of any great individual scientist. They really embody this orange meme. It's like nationalism, individualism, science, economy, progress, capitalism. This orange meme, a lot of people in the modern West are part of the orange meme, the blue meme, or the green meme. So the green meme, let's get to the green sensibility here, and that is the pluralistic egalitarian. This is kind of what the liberal West is stuck in currently, people who achieve this meme. And that is multiculturalism, equality, consensus, environmental concerns. And this is a postmodern society, a society with civil rights, environmentalism. This meme is really about sensitivity to others. There's much better maps than I'm going through right now that really break down the evolution of these memes. A lot of people are in the green meme. They're very concerned about equality, tolerance, understanding the other, understanding the world outside of their little family order. And the issue with the green meme, obviously, is that it's kind of anti-borders, it's anti-hierarchy of any kind, it's anti-all tradition. So it has a lot of antagonism with other memes. It has a lot of antagonism with the orange meme, with the blue meme. And the issue is anyone in any single one of these memes is going to look out at the other memes. So if someone is, let's say, hyper leftist, they want to abolish all hierarchies, and they're all about egalitarianism, socialism, multiculturalism, these things, the conformist, mythic, traditional meme is going to appear as very evil. We need to break down patriarchy. We need to break down the traditional roles of man and women in family. And this creates a lot of antagonism. Essentially, Ken Wilber's project is mapping the levels of consciousness and helping us get to an integrative thinking, right? So it's past all of these memes we've discussed so far. It's the yellow meme, and it's the integral systematic way of thinking. And essentially, as you progress in your individual consciousness past each meme, you get to this yellow meme, and it's the integrative. And this one, basically, the whole point of it is to transcend and include, right? So it's, hey, I'm no longer in the mythic order or scientific achievement, but I still include that into the higher level of thinking and the higher level of society. And this is why, for a lot of people who reach perhaps the yellow meme, oftentimes you're called a Nazi, or you're called a racist, or you're called, a patriarch or something by the green meme. And it's because you're actually bringing in certain systems that have worked in the past. I'm not saying to be racist or patriarchal or any of these things, but I'm saying someone who can think holistically, who can think integrally. They can look at each meme and understand its value. So for anyone here, you probably relate to certain colors or certain sensibilities more than others. For instance, I do resonate with the red meme, which is like power driven. It's about the heroic ideal. It's about glory. I like those concepts from the red meme. I also like the concepts of hierarchy, tradition, God from the blue meme. I also like the individualism and the radical quest for expansion and invention, and the capitalist meme of the orange, as well as parts of the green meme, which is about including everyone. So there's things from each meme that are important. And the cool thing is once you understand and are getting into an integral way of thinking about the world, you can see other people and where they're at in their consciousness. For instance, like I have a rekindling of Christian faith in my life. But when I meet people who like go to church and they're like Christ supremacists and Bible thumpers who are like, Christ is the only way, he's the way, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I agree with you to some extent. But at the same time, I see they're trapped in the blue meme, right? They haven't ascended beyond the blue meme in order to look at it in a deeper way. And this gets into a couple distinctions that we're going to go through in future podcasts with Brennan about how essentially the grand issue of the modern day is that people who are stuck in the orange sensibility, scientism, rationalism, individualism, right? They only have a very narrow concept of science. Their concept of science has no room to include God or like transcendental ideas. And the people who are stuck in the blue meme have a very narrow understanding of religion. It's like the Bible thumping Christ supremacists, right? And essentially, if we're ever stuck in these memes, we're not going to be able to create an integral society, an integral way of thinking about the world. And this is why Ken Wilber is so amazing. If you are running a community, starting a community, or want to start a ReTribalize project in the future, we need to understand a way to communicate around ideologies, religions, spiritualities, and like integral way of looking at the world. So now I want to take a segue from Ken Wilber into Hegel's idea of Geist. So essentially, Hegel believes in a teleological view of history, and that just means history moves with a purpose. It is God essentially moving through humanity, evolving towards ultimate complexity, beauty, and God. So if we look at the evolution of human societies, right, from tribes to agricultural revolution and civilizations to industrial revolution and, nation states and capitalism. This is essentially God, or the Geist, moving through humanity towards ultimate complexity and ultimate beauty. And each level up comes with a lot of problems. It comes with a lot of challenges. But essentially, Hegel sees history evolving towards something. And so do I. And so does Ken Wilber. And this happens through essentially what Hegel describes as the dialectic. And the dialectic is essentially a conversation between people and a conversation between nations and ideas. Essentially, there's a thesis, an initial position or statement, right? Let's say a thesis of capitalism and the rise of industrial civilization. Then there's an antithesis or a contradiction or its opposite, communism, right? And then there's a synthesis, a unity that preserves what's valuable from both. And like you could argue that in the Marxian view, there's capitalism, there's communism, and now we are left with liberal democracy. Essentially, whether you like that example or not, history is evolving towards something. And I think this idea is really important when we're looking at Ken Wilber, right? And when we're looking at Ken Wilber, we can see that it seems like humanity is evolving towards something. Now, you may not believe that we've progressed much in post-modernity or modernity, but we have achieved, obviously, a different level of consciousness that hasn't quite been seen before. If we go back to hunter-gatherer tribes, for instance, they're all warring against each other. Warfare was constant in the tribal units, and there was no sense of I'm going to be open to the other. There was none of that. If we look at the bands of, let's say, settlers in the New Worlds coming into Texas, they were not trying to go into the Comanche, tribes and being what do you guys believe? And no, they were trying to kill each other, right? So that tribal instinct has evolved a lot towards egalitarianism, where people are actually trying to understand the other. The group identity has broken down. We're trying to move into a planetary identity, but it's becoming so problematic. And I think this is where Hegel, Marx, and a lot of the last century thinkers kind of break down. Is last century, we're in this war of ideologies, great ideologies. We need a one world government and a Marxist communist utopia, or we need fascist nation states, or humans are thinking on a much bigger level. And there's many reasons for this, technology being a primary mover. When you get atom bombs, what do you do in that case scenario, right? So the issue is, and where I see human consciousness actually evolving towards, is actually more decentralized units of power and integral thinking. I think the next step from pluralism is not necessarily a global society, but a global network of complexity science, sustainable development. It's more decentralized. Hear me out quick for my conspiracy theory. No, just my theory on human development. So the beginning of Ken Wilber's map, you could argue, was the Bronze Age. Hunter-gatherer bands, nomadic tribes. During the Bronze Age, we saw hunter-gatherer bands basically rise into city-states, right? Greek city-states. So essentially, this was the beginning of his cultural development map, was the Bronze Age, 1,500 years ago. And I actually think we're actually returning to a new Bronze Age. We're literally spiraling upwards and going to repeat the Bronze Age, but at a higher octave with technology included. So a lot of people think we're going to need more centralization of power, a global world order, in order to help humanity find peace and prosperity and evolve. But in fact, we're actually circling back towards decentralized city-states, nomadic tribes again. But these nomadic tribes aren't regressing to a primitive organization or a survival instinctive beige meme. They're actually going towards the yellow integral system, integral way of being. So it's almost imagine nomadic tribes, but equipped with technology and a higher level of consciousness that's been through this entire consciousness evolution. And this is where the idea of decentralization comes in, where I'm going to complete this theory to you. So decentralization and centralization, this is the big story of the past 200 years, okay? Basically, during the Industrial Revolution, we saw the centralization of everything. Before the Industrial Revolution, there were small villages, local artisan markets. There was decentralized everything. There was feudal kingdoms. We lived in a feudal society. After the Industrial Revolution, there was factories, railroads, telegraph. All the power started to concentrate, and a new class emerged, the industrial capitalists controlling vast empires, and also nation states. And then we saw in World War II, right, these nation states go to war against each other. And each of these nation states were basically touting an ideology, right? They were touting, this is the way we think life should be. And they were all actually just expressing a meme, right? They were expressing a lot of the orange meme, a lot of the nationalist, capitalist, scientific meme. But let's continue with the story of decentralization or centralization here. So basically there was a banking takeover in 1913 and 1944. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was created. So now money was centralized. Central banking came about. And central banking existed before, but the Federal Reserve turned everything on its head. It created a global banking system. And this came into full fruition in 1944, Bretton Woods. Basically, the dollar became the world currency. And the result of this is there's a handful of central banks who control global finance. They print money from thin air and then lend it to nations, right? And when the banks collapse in 2008, who bails them out? The Federal Reserve prints all of this money to bail out these banks, right? But it does this through creating inflation where everyone pays it, Essentially, what we see is the world banking system get put into place. The UN gets put into place. And basically these nation states consolidate with hundreds of millions of people. And this liberal global capitalist, establishment gets put into place that we're still experiencing today. And I want to argue here that we saw peak centralization in the 1950s, which I talked about in my last video. Essentially, there was 4 TV channels then. There was 3 anchors, and like Hollywood and Madison Avenue, they controlled culture. Everything was centralized. But there's a decentralization revolution happening right now. And this is actually right in line with Ken Wilber's, future, basically evolution of society, the Geist of humanity. Do you see? I should make a whole video about Karl Marx, but Karl Marx believed in Hegel's idea of there's a Geist happening within humans. And he saw after the Industrial Revolution that the Geist was moving towards a one world communist body or a one world, centralized power. And in fact, most people in the 20th century thought of this like, hey, if we just create the perfect religion or the perfect economic system or the perfect ideology, then we'd have world peace. But this is super problematic because the centralization of everything in large nation states, this creates a system where millions are forced to live under laws they hate. It creates perpetual internal civil war. And also nation states need perpetual external civil war or war to create any sense of group cohesion. Group cohesion falls away in nation states so quickly. Also, large nation states or one world, a global world order is a bureaucratic nightmare. It's corruption, waste, culture wars. Like the UN, you think that's actually an efficient governing body? Not at all. And so large nations have constant civil war or like cold civil war, or they require constant external threat to unite people. And then huge governing bodies, no one really loves them and they're super inefficient. And this is why small governments solve everything. They're the way of the future. And people in a small government, for instance, let's say a ReTribalize project, right, which we're trying to create here. In a ReTribalize project, if you filter people in and you keep them small, like 200 people max, everyone knows the leaders personally. Like democracy could actually work, right? Because if everyone knows what they're voting for. There's also real accountability and real participation. The founding fathers of America thought that there's a couple things that create a really strong nation or governing body. And that is self-governance, like participation in self-governance, private ownership, as well as virtue, right? So when you have, let's say you're in a group of 200 people, guess what? Virtue becomes actually important because your reputation matters. In our soulless cities with hundreds of millions of people in our nation, no one has a reputation anymore. If you don't have a reputation anymore, you can't feel good for embodying virtue. Like, this is one of the problems I have is like there's no pure recognition for embodying glory or embodying virtue or embodying excellence, right? So virtue goes out the window. Also, if you only had 200 people together, self-governance is very real. People feel like their idea of citizenship, like they have a say in the government, is very real. So they take on the problems, they think about them in complex ways. They have symposiums like they did in Athens. I have this example, like in Athens, there was self-governance in the city-state model. So everyone knew each other, right? The voting citizens, they would all get together to talk philosophy, to talk politics, to talk war, to talk about the future of Athens in gentlemanly symposiums every night. It's because they felt like what they have to say and what they have to think actually matters. So democracy can work in smaller, segments. Then also there's free association. So instead of, nation states of millions and millions of people, like imagine thousands and thousands of smaller communities, right? Where people can freely associate with communities they align with. And these communities are broadcasting on the internet, letting people know, like, and sharing value with the world. So people can find, a value-based community they really align with. So this is the idea of small governance and decentralization. And the crazy thing, it's already happening in the technological space. For instance, anyone with a phone can out-broadcast CNN, right? Everyone is broadcasting their own, signal into the world. Also, we don't need the central banks anymore. I think the central banks, the Fed, the banking monopoly is one of the greatest evils within humanity. Go look up videos about the Federal Reserve. But we can create our own internal economy and own internal cryptocurrency. Like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, peer-to-peer money, these things do change the world and how we can do governance and how we can do economics. The network state biology goes much deeper into this. And then education's decentralized. Basically, everything is decentralized right now online. And that's going to change how humans get together, as I've talked about in my previous videos. Like influencers like me can reach millions of people a year, funnel them into an online network, and then filter from the online network into real life communities. And if those real life communities have an internal economy or entrepreneurs who are building cool projects into the world, they can hire from the network so people can come live, work, and be surrounded by kindred people. That's the vision. And going back to Ken Wilber now. So the reason this is so relevant, I think, today is the fact that we're witnessing massive conflicts between nation states and a lot of movement towards a global world order or a global identity. And I think a global identity is cool after we have decentralized states. And this is about creating a global network, right? And I think the leaders of ReTribalize projects, like if we could have, let's say 100 ReTribalize projects, right? Then you have a larger network that is the new state, right? But this goes way into the future, but I do see the future being defined by decentralized civilizational projects, ReTribalize projects, that's what I'm calling them, united within a larger network. And the cool thing is the smartest people on earth. I've talked to the friends of billionaires and people on the tech right and the network state guys, and they're all interested in how do you create a decentralized form of governance that can unite network states, that can unite ReTribalize projects, that can unite intentional communities into a new type of state and a new type of citizen. It's very beautiful, these ideas coming out. But all this comes back to leaders, right, who can transcend and include previous memes or previous levels of consciousness. This is so important. And this is why Ken Wilber is the philosopher of the tribes of the future, is you're going to have people who all think differently about the world. Perhaps they're stuck in one of these sensibilities or memes, or perhaps they embody many of them, right? What a leader needs to do is be able to go beyond each sensibility and see how to integrate them into a larger whole. For instance, I really do see, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. I really do see the tribes of the future incorporating ideas of hierarchy, incorporating ideas of the heroic ideal, incorporating ideas of the ritual, of the animistic, magical level of consciousness, as well as scientific achievement, all together in harmony. This should be the goal. And I'm just going to preview one of the next episodes of the ReTribalize project podcast, and it's about Prometheus. For instance, a lot of intentional communities right now, and one of the reasons they're a big turnoff to a lot of people, is they seem to be focused going backwards, returning to the primitive, returning to earlier memes. And I want to see ReTribalize projects and decentralized communities that are much more Promethean, meaning they're moving forward towards energy abundance, towards smart industries, peak vitality, like literally creating a new renaissance. Like, how do we do that? What is the scientific, the cultural, the economic, the principles that we could experiment with to not just regress as humanity, but move forward beyond the point we're at now? And I really think we could do this. Think about this. Right now, we have like a couple hundred civilizational projects going on and people trying out different economic, political, religious systems. Imagine if you had hundreds of thousands of civilizational projects going on, each uniting the best talent around a shared identity or shared group feeling, right? And it's aspiring upwards. You would literally get to, through trial and error, try out different economic systems at work, try out different, try out different cultural projects together. That's the vision of the future that I see. And it starts with integral leadership in many ways. So that was a brief intro to Ken Wilber. We talked a lot about many different things: decentralization, centralization. If you take anything from this video, the geist of history is evolving with a mission. And I think the next evolution of it is decentralization. It's the only thing that really solves the problems we are up against. And within decentralization, each ReTribalize project needs leaders and people capable of thinking integrally, thinking through every different sensibility and meme that brought us to this point as humanity, and learning to incorporate ideas not in a dogmatic way, not in a narrow way, but in a deep way. And if we can do that, we could create basically a living symbol of what tribe, community, and nations could be. And again, not everyone is up to this challenge. Humanity, the masses, will not follow this project. But what we can do is create the symbol of what life could be and kind of lead the way, like the tip of the spear. Because a couple hundred years from now, I think this is going to be the new world order. It's going to be a tribal world order with greater global or planetary governing bodies of some kind, maybe decentralized blockchain technologies. Who knows? Let me know your thoughts on that. My name is Christian. This is the ReTribalize podcast. Make sure to drop a 5-star review wherever you listen to this, whether that's on Spotify or iTunes. And also, come subscribe to the ReTribalize Substack. It's free. Link in the description below. Put your email in there, because a lot of the times podcasts, YouTube channels, they go missing after a month or a year or whatever. But if you subscribe to the Substack, I can always keep you updated with this project as it develops. That's the point of the ReTribalize project, to develop, to express the philosophy, the values, and also document my journey in starting the first town. So anyways, my name is Christian. Grandiose and glorious projects we got going on here. Come join us, entrepreneurs. Come join us, investors. Come join us, land owners. All the ways to do that are on retribalize.org. Peace.